Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. It's James here at Bespoke, and we've done a few videos up on the YouTube channel, but for a long while we haven't done any tutorials. Now we're getting straight back into the tutorials with a very popular platform. Just like the Aries Striker AS01, we now have the Aries Striker AS02. Now we've been through the differences in this product in a previous video where we talked about the breakdown, what's included in bits and pieces. You can find that on the YouTube channel. However, that was a little bit outdated because the sample that we had a different sear design and a few little sort of quality differences here and there, nothing major. Everything else externally is going to be exactly the same, and the sears are the biggest difference that they've changed, and they've actually done a similar design to our ED1 trigger system for the AS01. So we're going to get right into this. This is going to be a complete upgrade guide for the AS02, everything you may need. There'll be little differences, like if you're not putting the ED1 cylinder, maybe using the Aries one or even an Edgy if you can afford it. It'll very much be the same process. You'll just switch out the different parts. Now you'll notice this has the ED1 cylinder fitted, and we're going to go through what happens fitting an upgrade cylinder, what things you'll need to do, as well as the tools you'll need, and certain modifications that we recommend as well. So you'll also see that this has a hot wheel adjuster on there. Just ignore that as much as you can for now. We'll go into that in a future video. So you've got your AS02. Your cylinder will be black here because it will be completely standard. So you're just pulling it out of the box. Majority of them that came into the UK were Japanese specs, so they were doing about 280. However, this has been rectified now, and they should all come with either a spring in the box or it should be already fitted into the gun, which should put the gun at around 400 to 420 feet per second as an average. It's not a guarantee. So the first thing you might want to do to this Striker is the same that we did with the AS01, is the cylinder being so faulty. If I actually have one here, which I do, this is the standard cylinder that came out of it. You'll see they've slightly changed. Let me zoom in here so you can see. They've slightly changed the pin design. They've gone from roll pins to a solid steel pin. However, these are still failing with it, even as little as one game day. Aries really didn't learn from the mistakes with the last one. However, they obviously want to keep the cost down on these rifles, and they don't want them to be massively expensive straight out of the box. Because I imagine if they fix this issue but they put the price up, people would have known that the gun was more expensive. It is more expensive than the AS01, but not by much. But I think even with the sear design that they've gone to compared to the AS01, that increase in price is well worth it in my opinion. So this is going to be a standard cylinder assembly. So with this tutorial we're going to be going through changing this cylinder out, because even if you do put like a heavy piston in here or other bits and pieces, high powered spring, this is still going to fail at some point. So at some point down the road, unless you're running like a Mancraft SDIK, you're going to be replacing this. So we removed this from the AS02. So first of all, what we want to do, we want to strip the rifle down. I can't quite get the full rifle in shot here with the camera system that I'm using, so you're just going to have to bear with me on this. So you have a 3mm Allen key that's needed for the rear screw and the one at the rear of the handguard as well. I'm just going to pop the magazine out here just for Pete's sake anyway. We're going to remove these two screws. You do get screws in the grip that you can use. I just tend to use these Allen drivers just because I can use them a lot quicker than using an Allen key itself. So we're going to remove these two screws, and that's going to allow us to remove the stock section of this rifle. And then what we do is we get the trigger guard assembly here and we just pull it down, and eventually it will release. And then with those two screws and the trigger guard being removed, what we can do is we can just pull the stock downwards and it removes it from the gun. So with the stock now removed, we can access the trigger box, we can access, we can better access the cylinder, although with the AS02 compared to the AS01, instead of just punching this pin out, you've just got a little 2mm Allen screw, which I'll remove now. just by removing that countersunk screw. Pop that to one side, and if we flip it over we can just push the pin out from the other side. And they've still got this live cocking indicator. Love or hate this feature. I think it's a complete waste of time. And this is the first part you can see there, which we'll get to a little bit later, where it's already causing issues and jamming up the cylinder. But treat this as if you've bought this out the box and you're removing the standard black cylinder. Now with that pin removed, we can pull the handle up and we can pull the cylinder all the way to the rear, which removes the cylinder. So at this stage you're going to have your black cylinder with your bolt handle attached. Now you'll notice that on your AS02 you will have a different rear bolt handle compared to this one, and this was basically just because I pulled a gun out of the box for this section. There was a customer that was after one, he couldn't find one anywhere, so I just gave him the one off mine, and we've just put an AS01 on there just because I had one spare. So you'll remove this screw out the back of the cylinder. I'm just going to do that for you now. It's a 3mm Allen key. Just going to remove that, and then this you'll feel it trying to push up, and it's basically because you've got a little spring and a bearing or a stopper. You could either have a bearing or a stopper. I've seen both. And then you pull the handle off, which would be off your standard assembly, and then you can switch it out with your upgraded part or vice versa. Now what you will notice is they've made a couple of little changes on this cylinder. As you can see, the draw for the bottom of the cylinder is very much the same length as the ED1. The right hand side where the pin sits is very much the same, and then what they've actually done is they've extended this ever so slightly, and this is where your cocking indicator will get stuck. And what basically happens is as you draw the cylinder, the indicator itself gets stuck on this part of the cylinder, and you can see it started to, I mean, this has literally been drawn on the gun like 2 or 3 times, and you can see straight away this pot metal isn't coping well. So there's a couple of things you can do here. You can either snap this indicator off, which is what I recommend, because this is, depending whether you remove this or not, this is just a problem waiting to happen. So you can either pop the pin out here, or what I tend to do, because this is my own rifle, I'm going to do it. So what I'm going to do here, because this is my own rifle and I know how much troublesome this part can be, I'm going to get a set of pliers and I'm going to bend this indicator just left and right, and then you'll see the spring pops off and the indicator falls out. The pin's quite securely in place, so I'm happy with this. This is now removes that issue from ever being a problem again. These pins seem a lot stronger because they haven't got that that pin design that holds it in place in the gun. So this seems a lot stronger than the previous AS01 model, so we're just going to set this to one side. Now the differences to this compared to the AS01 is you've obviously got the screw there, so you've got a little machine section there, and we may be doing a tutorial on how to get the ED1 strong pin to fit this AS02 as well, but in a later video. So we've got this stripped down now. We've got the cylinder removed. We're going to take our new cylinder. We're going to put the bolt handle onto the cylinder. We're going to get our little ball bearing, pop it onto the spring there, and you'll find this easiest to do is if you have gravity holding the ball bearing in place there. So all I do is while that's holding in place, I just put the cylinder in and then align the bolt handle and push the cap down, and then I'm just going to get the screw. And I highly recommend Loctiting these screws in. Not like some super strength Loctite that you can't, or you're going to struggle to remove. Just want something to stop it coming loose, because when this bolt is operated, these can come loose. And you know, you've probably heard it many times before on different forums or videos where people will tell you, now when drawing back an airsoft sniper rifle, when you do this, you're going to put sideways force, pushing it over to the left on the receiver. Now the best way to charge these cylinders, to cock them, sorry, is by placing your hand on the back there and then by putting a thumb, and then what this does is it enables you to pull the cylinder straight back in the gun, and then pushing it forward is very easy, and this limits where the end cap can put onto your receiver. So that is your cylinder switched over. The ED1 cylinders do come assembled, as well as the Aries and the edgy ones. And if you're doing a Nemo kit, it's a little bit different. But, you'll still have had to have done this process anyway, so you could pop the cylinder to one side. And we've already removed, so if you are fitting an ED1 cylinder into your AS02, the first thing for you to do is remove or modify that cocking indicator. I highly recommend removing it. Just get rid of it, because it's a problem that you just don't want in the future. You don't want to be in a game and then that to sort of snag up, and then you've got to go back to the safe zone and switch out your gear, or find a tool to fix it. So dead straightforward. Putting this cylinder back into the rifle, you've obviously got the little lever here which stops you pulling the trigger when the cylinder's pulled all the way back. Now you can leave this in, which what you do is you'll pop the cylinder in, but as you pop the cylinder in, you're going to have to find something to push the sear, if you can see it, to push that sear down while the cylinder goes in, because it's going to stop the sear and you can't pull the trigger to release the sear to push the cylinder in. So what I do for this, and I have a few of these strikers, take my word for it, on every single one of the strikers that I own personally, I remove this part, and I'm just conscious whenever operating the bolt never to pull the trigger when the bolt is locked to the rear. If you don't want to do this, just skip this step and you can pop your cylinder back into the rifle. So all we're doing is removing that cap, letting the spring jump out, and then we're removing this lever, and then for the sake of it I'm just going to pop the cap back on there, just to help stopping any ingress of dirt or anything into the side of the trigger box. And that modification is complete. So now, as we put the cylinder in, like I said, you will struggle if you haven't done this. Just popping it in, it hits the sear, you can pull the trigger, and then it allows me, and this is great for if you're swapping or you want to do some field stripping or anything like that. It's so much easier to get the bolt back into your rifle, and then you haven't got to worry about it. So we pop the pin back in. Now if you hadn't modified that cocking indicator, what you'll find is drawing your upgrade cylinder, you'll pull it back and it'll get to a point where it doesn't travel any further and it feels like it's stuck. And what that means is the cocking indicator is stopping your receiver being pulled back far enough for the piston to latch onto the sear. So we've popped the pin back in there, and I'm just going to use a 2mm Allen key to pop that countersunk screw back onto the pin to hold it in place. And then we can do a quick test to make sure the cylinder latches, which it does, and then pushing it forward and latching the handle down. And then the next thing you may experience with these AS02s, this isn't just installing a upgraded cylinder either. This also includes, like if you put in just a higher powered spring into the standard cylinder, this may or may not happen. It's going to pull the trigger now, and this one fires. So what you may experience is when you go to fire the AS02, you pull the trigger and nothing happens, and then sometimes one of two things happens: it just won't release at all, or you're pulling and pulling and pulling and eventually it will release. So we're just going to test it again. So this one is absolutely fine, and this is basically down to the sear. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the modification you may need to do in terms of the sear. So we're going to remove these 3 Phillips screws on the trigger box here. I'm going to move this over so you can see. Let's zoom that in. So we remove the 3 Phillips screws here, here and here, and then that enables us to pull that off there. And as you can see, the sears have just jumped out, so I'm just going to try and pop them back into position. So the issue that I spoke about, the dead trigger, is basically what happens when the trigger hasn't got enough travel. You can see how little travel there is there to pull the sear down. There isn't enough travel on the trigger to pull the sear out of place of the piston. This happened on the AS01 as well. You can refer to our YouTube channel on the AS01 dead trigger fix, which you could do here in terms of wrapping heat shrink around this part of the trigger or even this horizontal sear. But with the many strikers that I've worked with since the AS02's release, the best modification is to this sear here. Now this one looks a lot smoother than the others that I've come in contact with. Some of them are very rough where they've been machined and such. So what's basically happening if you get that dead trigger issue is, as you're pulling the trigger, the sear is not being pulled down far enough. It literally might be hanging on by 1/2 mil, and it's enough to stop the piston from being released. So you're pulling the trigger, nothing's happening. Now in the cases of this, all I've done is, you can do it one of two ways. This leading edge here that grabs the piston, I literally very softly filed this and then polished it, so it was literally, maybe it's not a 90 degree, maybe it's like an 89.5 degree, just so it had a little bit of a bevel on it, not a lot at all, and that just helped with it being pulled down and not getting stuck on the piston. And then the other one is just this top bit here. If you, the last one that I did before, obviously this one being my own, is it really struggled releasing the piston, and there was just no travel on it whatsoever. So all I did was I modified this section here and just brought it down a little bit and then polished it all up, and then putting it in, test it. If it's still doing it a little bit but not quite as often, just open the trigger box again and just do a slight more adjustment. If you do need help with this and you're in the UK, you can send your rifle to me and I'll happily do this for you, but it will have the cost incurred of an engineer fee and return postage. So luckily with this rifle I haven't got to do any of that, but if you had, you just modify your sear and then we're just going to put everything back into place. Now if you have seen our videos on the YouTube channel about fitting our ED1 trigger set into the AS01, you will notice that Aries have paid very close attention to the upgrade parts we were making, and they've used the design of using a horizontal and a vertical sear. And Aries, if you're listening, you know, happy to accept royalties on that, but jokes aside, more than happy to help with anything you guys might be doing in the future. We've got lots of ideas. You might also notice that the AS02 has a short barrel design, very much like our bespoke short barrel, but it's still 30 to 23 mil, which is the Aries accessories, so we're not too bothered about that because we've still we can still carry on doing those barrels. So we're just going to pop this back in. This one really wants to jump out, so I'm just going to make sure I can hold it in place, and you can use a flathead, you can use an Allen key, and all you're going to do is going to apply some downwards pressure to that horizontal sear to keep it in place. Thread the cap over and then literally push down on the cap and remove your tool. So before we complete the trigger box reassembly, you get a Phillips head screw from Aries, which they're very cheap, very low quality, and they can and have been known to snap quite frequently. Lycan do a stainless steel version of this screw. It's the same, and it uses the 2mm Allen key, which means again you can be using the Allen keys that are supplied with the gun, which then means that you can field strip this gun even further using the tools that already came with it, and you haven't got to go find a Phillips screwdriver, although everyone has one. But these are tools that are carried in the gun, so you haven't got to go find one elsewhere. So very high quality. They're only like $2.99, which, you know, it's very inexpensive but a very essential upgrade part in my opinion. For anything that I am showing you today, I will provide links down in the description below so you can find them fairly easily. So with that reassembled now, I'm just going to test it to make sure. And it releases fine, so we're happy. And that concludes the first section of this upgrade guide, which is the cylinder and trigger. The trigger doesn't really need upgrading, and they've done a much better job than they did with the AS01. The AS01 design was very, very poor. We'll soon see if they decide to incorporate the new sear design into the newer AS01s that are coming out of factory. That would be nice to see, and it just means that yourselves as consumers don't have to buy as many upgrade parts for this platform. So I'm just going to pop the screws back in there. And that section of this upgrade guide is done. So now you have successfully upgraded your cylinder, spring, whichever thing you may be doing, but now you know how to take the cylinder out. A few recommended modifications that I can't recommend enough because they are essential. Please take it from me, I run about 3 or 4 of these rifles, even going back to the very early AS01s. So thanks very much for tuning in, hope this has been of some use to you, and please stay tuned because we'll be doing more with this rifle in the upcoming videos which will be released very, very soon. Thank you.